it's not about the number of doors you own, because the reality is now you are in more debt than you started. And what is your end game?
Right.
So
Debt
if you
adds to
don't,
stress as
if
well.
you don't have an end game, and these properties are not going to be paid off
Right.
for when your end game or your goal,
Your family will be
Yeah.
paying it off at your next generation. It'll work
Right?
in reverse. What was your first investment in Belleville?
So our first investment in Belleville was a single family home that had already had two separate units established, an upper and a lower. And basically what needed to be done was just to legalize it and force appreciation. So it was under 500,000. And our second investment in Belleville was another single family home property that had a potential with an addition for a third unit, which we are currently going to be converting into a triplex, which also was incredibly low for the price point. Under 500,000, to be specific, under 450,000.
And that's the good thing about being a local realtor here is she knows the deals. So that's
Yes.
why she's always watching. She's always out there saying, hey, look at this. I got to jump on this. I'm like, no, you don't. But anyways, that's what the situation is. So she's always out there. As soon as you post something or a new MLS comes out in Belleville, she will know before the computer. Put it that way.
Yeah, so going back to our first and second investment, I think not only that they both were under 500,000, they both were once you understood the strategy behind them, you can essentially, really make the investment work for you. So being under 500,000, obviously focused on the cash flow potential, and then looking towards the appreciation in the future. So that's always our investment strategy on how we look at deals, look at properties, focusing on the cash flow. It has to be cash flowing, and then look at the long-term appreciation over, a 5 to 7 years time frame.
So in terms of cash flow, how much cash flow are you expecting from these two properties? Is it in the hundreds? A couple?
Yeah. So
Okay.
for the first one, based on our numbers, based on the interest rates that are where we're at right now, we are positioning to be somewhere under $1,000 cash flow on the duplex.
That's pretty good.
And then for the triplex, which is, you're supposed to say, damn.
What?
You gotta be like,
Damn. And number two?
and number two, where we are right now, we're student rentaling this property until I am able to start the conversion. Once we get approval, and this one,
So you're doing the building yourself?
no.
Okay. Because that's what I thought I heard.
Once we get the permits lined up, the engineer to start the process of submitting, which we are in the process of doing. This property right now in the student rental is cash flowing just under 700.
Cool.
Yeah,
So
and
that's really good.
And that's excluding
The additional
management fees.
Yeah, and I think one thing why I didn't react the way you wanted me to react is because it doesn't just happen easily cash flow. People have to realize and be practical about it.
Yes.
The investment you do to make the home ready
Yes.
is in the thousands and thousands of dollars. So
Yes.
it's not from month one when you get renters, you're getting 1,000 in. You're using that money towards paying back the loans, paying back your savings that you actually took out money from
Yeah.
to get the property ready.
Exactly.
And that's construction
So-
fees, that is permit fees, that is delays, that is little ting here and there that actually happen. So cash flow, yes, in terms of a month to month, but actually until maybe like a year or two, that's when you're actually clear.
Yes, absolutely. So I think it's important for people to understand cash flow, because a lot of people go back and say, well, I don't want to get into real estate or rental properties because, yeah, I'll be cutting $200 cash flow per month, which is not worth it, right? But if 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 the property is cash flowing and it's not in a negative state every month, and essentially you are budgeting for expenditure item, whether you're property managing it yourself, self-managing, or property management outsource, and that is $200 of, after clearing all your expenses, budgeting for vacancies and expenditure and things like that. So like your furnace, your roof, all of that on a monthly basis. I think $200 is still a lot from a ROI perspective, because you have a gross monthly income coming in of about $4,000. You're still cash flowing $200, and this property has potential for appreciation because you've just forced appreciation on the property by converting it into a duplex, or if it's an already converted duplex, it's legal. And it's now going to be classified as an income generating property versus a single family home. Right? So you have to think about, yes, $200 might not make sense in the grand scheme of things, but think about $200 compounded appreciation, the value of when you're going to decide to exit and sell, and thinking about retirement, right?
And let's put this in perspective for all you who think that $200 is what? Which bank account can you put your money in in a bank account, saving account, that will give you $200 a month? Nowhere.
Exactly.
Unless you have over $200,000 saved, that can generate you $200 a month. So, like we were saying before, it's diversify. It's a long-term game. Don't let these fools get you confused in terms of real estate, money right there, boom, boom, boom. No, it's a long-term game.
Yeah, and it's not a get-rich-quick game. So again, going back to thinking about the $200 today versus $200 compounded, but also thinking about it from a retirement. Because think about it, if you have 4 properties that are cash flowing $200 a month, right? That's $800 a month for 4 properties. So again, a lot might say, well, $800 with cost of living and where things are today, but you have to realize your cash flow money is essentially not to go and buy things with it and to help you pay your bills on a monthly basis. Your cash flow is essentially your reserve, which you should maintain for about 6 months into the property. Every property should have a reserve fund, at least 6 months to clear expenses, and then just reinvesting this cash flow back into the business, right? So it's not about going and buy the fancy car with the $200 or paying down a lease or paying off your mortgage. Well, yeah, some months you probably can, but be prepared that this $200 essentially is not to go and, kind of use that as extra spending money. It's essentially money that you reinvest back into the business. So looking at it from an income expenditures perspective and long term, and how the bank looks at it from appreciation, this is where this is going to prepare you for, financial freedom, or even to be able to retire and not having to think about, what age you want to retire or how much income you want to retire.
Think about this. You mentioned 8 properties, right? All of them obviously have mortgages that are slowly being paid off. But in, let's say, 10 to 20 years, when you do decide to retire, like we want to retire earlier, but like just for everyone else, in 10 to 20 years, how much has that property going to appreciate, right? It could probably double in value or even triple in that sense, knowing how historically it looks. And once that does happen, you can sell 2 properties, pay off for the existing 1 mortgages, and you probably would have a good milli in the bank. Yeah. And what would you do with that? That is wealth. That is fun times in your retirement days.
Yes, exactly. So, your pension check or your government check that
it's just going to be casino money. That's like, government gives me money. I'm laughing because I'm putting it back into the government when I lose it at the casino.
Exactly. Right. So it would just be like extra cash. So then also going back to another point that I wanted to talk about is, it's hard for me to explain this, but I think,
Take your time.
being on the real estate
Take your time.
side of things and being a realtor, everyone, and sometimes I get asked this, so how many properties or how many units you own, and how many properties or how many units you're planning to have. And the reality for me is, it's not about how many doors you have or how many property you owned. Is if they're not paid off and you're not strategically thinking about,
you just have more debt, right?
You just have more debt, which is not going to help you long term anyways.
I have 10 properties. Yeah, how much mortgage do you have? That means you have
Right?
$10 million in mortgages.
So I think the most important thing for us is, we don't want to get to 100 units in any shape or form. And I think the bigger thing behind real estate investing for me, for us restarting this process, is to gain our time back, to spend time with our kids. And the second thing is to have a peace of mind, because who wants to be 45 or 50 and be, still chasing money?
That's
and
10 phone calls of 10 problems, right? So yeah.
Right. So I think those are the two things that I personally have identified. And I know you kind of hold me to this.
Oh yeah.
Often.
You said 3 years. Yeah. I remember the last pod, 2 pushing 3. So we will see when we're doing this podcast
exactly
where we are.
Yeah. So our bigger thing is, you hear about, don't get me wrong, I have nothing against the individuals who are owning 400 doors, 50,000, doors in context, 100 doors, $85 million in portfolio. Like, that is great. That's based on your goal. I think what people are getting caught up these days as an investor, as a real estate agent, is it's not about the number of doors you own, because the reality is now you are in more debt than you started. And what is your end game?
Right.
So
debt
if you
adds
don't,
to stress as
if
well.
you don't have an end game, and these properties are not going to be paid off,
right,
for when your end game or your goal,
your family will be paying it off at your next generation. It'll work in reverse.
Right. And nothing is wrong if you're family, because we're going to get to that other conversation about, why we created a trust and what we want our kids
We'll
to
save
have.
that for another pod, but it's very important to talk about how that structure works, because we had a lot of questions on what we should do with that. So I think we just covered it in another pod.
Exactly.
But yeah, I think one of the things too is, like, if you don't even like real estate, I would suggest you just do one property, one residential family property, because if you think about it, that's all you really need. You'll be well off. Mm-hmm. You will have no stress.
Yes.
You will definitely, in 10 to 20 years, that property will be paid off.
Yep.
And you will have another piece of property or another piece of cash or asset that you can use to yourself in your retirement, or pass down to your next generation. Whatever you do, that is all you need, is one single property.
Exactly. And we were on this, how many doors do we need to? We were on this conversation because we have to talk about it and what our goals are. And so for the viewers out there to understand, we're not looking to get at 100 doors or anywhere close to 100 doors. And again, this is no disrespect to anyone that have goals that are bigger than themselves. That, I think, is brilliant. It's amazing. But we are thinking about where we are as parents, what are our own personal goals, and what is going to be that number for us, that essentially, being self-employed, that will allow us to retire. Free up our time and to retire comfortably. And so that is that's the end game. The end game behind our number, which we will share in future podcasts to come, on why that number and how we will get to that number in order to be to build generational wealth, but also for us to retire early.